What day of the week is it, you ask? Oh, you didn't ask? Well, I'm gonna tell you. It's Toyota History Tuesday. Now get ready, because I'm sitting actually in the 2021 Toyota Sienna, but we're not talking about the Sienna today. We're actually talking about Toyota as a company. So buckle up, enjoy the legroom, because we're going on a road trip. So our road trip is actually going to take us back to Valentine's Day of 1867. So grab a loved one, but also in Kosai, Shizuoka, Japan. An individual by the name of Sakichi Toyoda, spelled Toyoda, was born. He was the son of a carpenter/farmer, and he was known to read a lot and actually organized a study group for various teenagers. Now, during his youth, Sakichi took a trip to the district of Ueno to visit the Third National Machinery Exposition. Big deal. And Sakichi was so inspired that his love of mechanics would start from this event. But let's fast forward a little bit from 1867, and we're ending up in 1926. There's flappers, there's jazz, all the great stuff that the 20s has, but this year, Sakichi Toyoda would start a company called the Toyota Automatic Loom Works. This was the company he set up to sell his revolutionary invention, the Type G. Now you might be thinking, what kind of car is the Type G? And I would understand why you would think that way, but the Type G is actually an automatic loom. The Toyota company started as an automatic loom manufacturer. Now this invention, its full name called the 1924 Toyota Automatic Loom Type G, increased textile output by 20-fold due to the mass production of this device. It earned Toyota the title of the father of the Japanese Industrial Revolution and made him a widely recognized leader in not only textile automation manufacturing, but also machinery and industry worldwide. He instituted the Japanese principle of jidoka, which refers to an intelligent automation, or automation with a human touch, as it's called. So this brought the Toyota family and Sakichi individually huge renown and a lot of income. But there was another piece of technology at the time that was really taking the world by storm, and that would be the automobile. So in 1933, the son of Sakichi Toyoda, Keiichiro Toyoda, would start the Toyota Motor Corporation. It started actually as a division of the Loom Works. The first two vehicles they made was the Type A1 passenger car and the Type G1 truck. These were pretty rudimentary, and they really went to the market in 1937. In 1937, also, the Toyota Motor Corporation was moved to be an independent company rather than under the Loom Works. In order to implement a logo for their company, they actually held a competition where entries were sent into them, and they received over 27,000 entries. The winning entry was the name Toyota written in katakana letters, which is kind of a shortening of the Japanese writing system, spelling Toyota actually in the shape of a circle, the recognizable emblem that we see today. Around this time, Rizaburo Toyoda, an individual who actually married into the Toyota family, said they should change the name of Toyoda to Toyota because it takes 8 strokes in the Japanese writing system to write Toyota rather than Toyoda, and 8 is considered a lucky number in Japan. So that's when they made the switch. Additionally, Toyoda with a D literally translates to fertile rice fields, and when trying to be a leader in a manufacturing industry, they wanted to distance themselves from an agricultural connotation. As many of us know, 1937 is approaching a very important worldwide event called World War II, in which the Japanese were a very major player. Approaching World War II, the Japanese government actually made the decision to restrict the import of Ford and General Motors vehicles to aid the Toyota Motor Corporation in making a domestic market of automobiles. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this, and they're all pretty complicated. They have to do with Japanese tradition, nationalism, and politics. So this is not the video for that, but the Japanese government was taking an interest in developing local economy and local manufacturing. With that being said, the Toyota Model AA, the AA, was 400 yen cheaper than the Ford and GM counterpart imports, so there actually was a market for this cheaper vehicle anyway, despite the assistance from the Japanese government, but sort of having a monopoly certainly does help. So in the late 30s up to 1945, World War II would kick off and Japan would be mainly involved as a belligerent against the United States and the Allied powers. And they would end up losing the war, of course. But during the war, the Japanese government actually took control of Toyota and had it manufacture very rudimentary military trucks. In fact, there were so many shortages on materials that these poor things were only made with one headlight. A little ridiculous looking, I'm gonna be honest. Then 1947 comes along after the war is over, and Toyota really kicked off making passenger vehicles again. Now, before I get into all of that, Toyota was really cutting edge for a couple of reasons, but one was this process of problem solving and improving processes in their company. It was called the 5 Whys, and it was actually invented by Sakichi Toyota himself, the founder of the company. As an example, there's some sort of shortage or problem in your company. You approach the individuals involved and you ask them why 5 times. Now, that might seem kind of silly, or that might seem like something your little cousin does when you tell them they can't play video games or something like that, but I'll explain an example and it'll show why this is such a cutting edge and interesting process. Let's say, for example, there is an employee who has to complete computerized reportings in order to complete their job, and it is not being done. So you, as the manager, approach this employee and you ask, why have you not been completing your tasks? And the employee responds, I'm unable to do them. It's not that I'm not wanting to do them, it's that I can't do them. So then you follow up with another why. Why can't you do them? Then their response is, I'm unable to connect to the internet. Okay, well, you're getting closer to the source of the problem, but you followed up with another why. Why can't you connect to the internet? Their response could be, the Ethernet cord is not providing internet to my computer. Then you ask, why isn't your Ethernet cord providing internet to your computer? And their response is, well, the building's internet is out. You have one more why left in your series of 5 whys, and you say, why is the building's internet out? Then you get to the source of the problem, which is the building's internet is out because our internet provider has a local outage. That's an example of why is there a problem and why are you unable to complete the task? Well, you don't have internet, you're not able to do it. So that's kind of a silly, lighthearted example, but there are similar things, whereas you can find what the real problem is, whether it's the employee's workload or work ethic, whether it's the process, and it allows the manager to actually be personally involved in this process. This built into the Toyota process was actually able to provide a much closer involvement from management in output and allows them to be connected with the boots on the ground that is doing the manufacturing and the sales and things like that. Okay, this brings us to 1947, and Toyota begins making passenger vehicles again, no longer military ones. They released a lineup called the Toyo Pets. Now, this is a very Japanese cultural type thing, but the Toyo Pets were simply small Toyota cars. They were simply smaller Toyota vehicles. They had the Toyo Pet SA, they had the Toyo Pet SB, they had the Toyo Pet Stout, they had the Toyo Pet Master, they had the Toyo Pet Corona, and they had the Toyo Pet Crown. So that was the lineup of vehicles Toyota was really manufacturing. But that brings us to 1957, as the Toyota Motor Corporation that we're going to focus on today is the US branch of it. So this is when the US branch of Toyota really kicked off. Toyota Motor Sales USA was kicked off in 1957. Now, its headquarters were actually formed in a former Rambler dealership in Hollywood, California. 1958 was the first sales year of Toyota USA, and let's just say that sales were bad. They sold 288 vehicles for the whole year. 287 of them were the Toyo Pet Crowns and 1 Toyota Land Cruiser. Now, Toyo Pet Crowns were considered kind of overpriced and underpowered for the American market, so they were actually discontinued just a few years later for the American market. So the Toyota Land Cruiser kind of held the ship down as being this powerful, off-road, very capable, rudimentary vehicle until 1965, when the Toyota Corona arrived, or Toyo Pet Corona. Now, the Corona was the first popular American Toyota vehicle, and just 2 years later in 1967, Toyota was the 3rd best-selling import brand in the United States. Now, Toyota vehicles' popularity wasn't really going to kick off until 1968, when a vehicle called the Toyota Corolla was released. You probably have heard of it. It is, to this day, the best-selling vehicle of all time. But the Corolla was introduced at a really opportune time, but a not opportune time for most of the world. There was an event called the oil crisis, or the energy crisis, taking place. Really, the roots of it started in the late 1960s, but it really got bad in 1973 and sort of had a reiteration in 1979. Just like the Japanese politics I mentioned earlier, getting really far into the energy crisis is not the purpose of this video, but what's important about the energy crisis is as it drove the supply of gasoline extremely low. So if there's an extremely low supply and a continuing demand, that the price of oil skyrocketed. There were oil lines that were miles and miles long. There were days that people didn't sell oil at all. The price of gasoline per gallon just skyrocketed through the roof. It was a crazy time, and Americans started focusing on not powerful, speedster, cool-looking, stylish cars, but started really refocusing on really great gas mileage. That's what their priorities were after this worldwide global catastrophe. So that's when the Corolla stepped in. Having a small size, a low curb weight, and a great gas mileage, the Corolla really took off with American consumers in conjunction with this energy crisis. Because of this issue and because of the Corolla's high performance, great gas mileage, affordability, that has put the Corolla as the #1 best-selling vehicle of all time, like I had mentioned earlier, but it has sold over 30 million vehicles worldwide. In 1975, Toyota overtook Volkswagen as the #1 import brand in the United States. Just 3 years later, in 1978, Toyota would actually win the import Triple Crown. What that means is that they won awards for highest number of trucks sold, highest number of cars sold, and highest sales of an import brand in the United States. Ever the cutting edge, in 1983, Toyota would debut the Toyota 4Runner as an adaptation of the Toyota Trekker. If you're not familiar with the history of the 4Runner, we did do a video on it. Just check 1 or 2 Tuesdays ago, and it'll have the history there. But this was really one of the most prominent new members of a class called the sports utility vehicle, the SUV, which is now controlling really the vehicle market. And Toyota was a major player in that class really broadening at the time. Was the first? No. But it was one of the first major ones that had 4-wheel drive, enclosed, off-road capable, and those sorts of things. In 1989, to take further control of the market, Toyota actually launched Lexus, which was their luxury brand. It launched with the LS400, and it launched with the ES250. Only 2 years later, Toyota actually surpassed other competition to be the #1 luxury import brand as well, despite only have launching Lexus 2 years ago. Throughout all of this nonsense, the Toyota Camry had been launched, and in 1997 it won the #1 passenger car in the United States award. But that same year, ever the cutting edge, Toyota would launch a vehicle called the Toyota Prius, and it was the first mass-marketed hybrid vehicle of all time. Now, the Prius was a really big deal because the gas mileage was so high, and that there was no class of vehicle called the hybrid at the time. As we know today, the hybrid class has expanded hugely and is another controller of the market, just like the SUV. But the Prius really forced other auto companies to begin mimicking their technology. Now, being an import brand, Toyota really didn't participate in motorsports for a really long time, but in the 1980s, they began participating in things like rally racing and all those sorts of things. Now, I jumped ahead just a little bit to talk about the Prius, but the year before, Toyota launched a vehicle called the RAV4, should sound familiar. And again, ever the cutting edge, the RAV4 was really the first modern example of what would eventually be considered a crossover. It was taking all the best portions of an SUV, a sports utility vehicle, and we're talking some off-road capability, we're talking storage space, we're talking just having a larger size, a higher roof, and things like that, and mixed it with some of the gas mileage, maneuverability of a standard car. Now, this crossover idea would expand and really, again, under the SUV umbrella, really start controlling the market like it has today. In 2001, Toyota became the 3rd best selling brand in all of the United States overall, not just in the import brand category. In 2003, Toyota launched Scion, their brand marketed towards youth. It launched in 2003 with an array of vehicles and actually would be discontinued in 2016. At this time, Toyota was investing largely in their hybrid technology, which they have, as we know, have expanded to their Camry, the Highlander, and more vehicles to come in their 2021, 2022 lineups as well. In 2008, the Great Recession was taking place, so Americans didn't have the money to spend on frivolous pursuits, particularly. The housing bubble had burst, and Americans were really struggling economically. Unemployment had also increased greatly. During the Great Recession, due to the affordability and great gas mileage of their vehicles, Toyota became the #1 auto brand in all of the United States. The Toyota Camry had been the #1 selling vehicle for the last 12 years. 11 of those 12 years, the Toyota Camry was the #1 selling vehicle, only surpassed one of those years, of course. Now, Toyota in 2009 through 2010 actually had to institute 2 pretty substantial recalls. There was an accelerator pedal sticking issue, and there was a floor mat that would cause the accelerator pedal to be sort of held down. But after doing all these recalls and spending a lot of money to make sure that this was set right, In 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake, the largest recorded earthquake in Japanese history, would strike Japan and cause major issues at the Toyota plants there. 4 of their plants and factories would be shut down. There was flooding from the tsunami, there was damage from the earthquake, and it was just a really tough thing. And the same year in 2011, a monsoon would cause 2 of the Toyota plants in Thailand to be flooded as well, so production went way down. But it only took until 2012 for Toyota to return to number 1 in the United States retail market, recovering from all of that shenanigan that they went through. In 2013, the 10 millionth powertrain was produced and the 1 millionth Toyota truck was assembled. In 2014, Toyota released their plans to develop a new United States headquarters in Plano, Texas, and they broke ground on that headquarters in 2015. And that brings us to where Toyota is today. They were cutting edge in not only the SUV market, but the crossover market and the hybrid market. They had really cutting edge policies that allowed their management to get personally involved in their employees' work and output. And they are now the number 1 most popular car company in the world, with the largest market share. Where is the Toyota lineup going to continue in following years? Well, we'll see. They're going to invest further into the hybrid market, and of course, we'll see where it goes from there. So thank you so much for tuning in for another Toyota History Tuesday. My name is Mitchell. Check us out next week and throw a like and comment down below. Thanks a lot.